it's very easy to think that we are listening when someone is saying something to us. And in fact, what might be happening is someone is speaking to us, but while we're hearing the words that they're saying, what's really going on is we're thinking, okay, well, what am I going to say in response to this person? Well, that's not really listening. That's worrying about how we're going to, like play ball with them if they're throwing something at us, or even if it's just a regular conversation, excuse me. There's this element of, but I have to say my part because I have something really important to say. And it's really helpful to realize that especially in close relationships, our words really matter. I had an experience with my dad as it happened. I was new on the path, and I was trying to think of Swamiji's writings, what would he enjoy? And so I sent him a few things that related to leadership and success, things that I knew he was dedicated to in his life, and he really enjoyed those. And I thought, oh, okay, well, he's ready for more. So I sent him The Path, Swami's autobiography, and I sent him Autobiography of a Yogi. I sent him all sorts of things, this whole stack of stuff. Well, that was way, way beyond. And I was using terminology that he couldn't relate to. I kept talking about energy. This was in the early 1980s when, in America, people didn't use that term. I mean, energy was like the power that comes to your house through the electric wires, or energy is, an energy shortage meant, that petroleum supplies were limited and the prices were skyrocketing, which happened here in America in the last year. Maybe it happened all over the world. And, so there was an energy crunch or an energy shortage. Those were the kinds of ways that my dad could relate to the term energy. Well, I was talking about energy inside the body, energy in our lives. He didn't know what to do with any of that. He just said, you're using very strange lingo, that you've picked up in this place, Ananda. It took probably 25 years before he could accept my spiritual life. He couldn't really ever understand it, I don't think. But on some heart level, he could relax around it. But it took 25 years. And I just had to have the patience. About every 5 years, he would ask me, first question was, because vegetarianism was very peculiar to him. So he would ask, what do you eat? What do you eat? I said, well, Dad, I eat things that didn't walk around, or they swim. I eat like everything else, in fact, just about everything else. But then he would ask about, what is this meditation stuff anyway? What is that all about? And I learned very quickly that I could give him about 2 or 3 sentences. And that was as much as he could absorb, and that was as much as he wanted to know. And I left it, and another 3 or 5 years would go by, and he would ask again, and I would give him, another 2 or 3 sentences, and I would let it go. A little bit like Nirmala's story of catching the ball and putting it down. You have to meter out what people can handle, what people can take, and that takes intuition, which again Nirmala was addressing. And so those skills come with intuition, with time, with sensitivity, with caring about the other person. I remember Swamiji telling, and this story was told publicly by the person, so I feel justified in saying it, but there was a fellow at Ananda who's still connected after all these years, and Swamiji waited 10 years to tell him something that he needed to hear, but Swami could tell that he was not ready to hear it. And so Swamiji waited 10 years to tell him. And what the thing was, is he said, "You think too much." And the man, in relating this story in a satsang, public satsang, said, if he had told that to me sooner than he did, I would not have known what on earth he was talking about. He said, I'm grateful that he waited that long, and I did need to hear it. I did think too much. I needed to work more from the heart, more from the intuitive side. But he said, if he had jumped the gun on that, I wouldn't have known what to make of it. And sometimes we only get one chance with that. Or in the case of my dad, we get our chance, but we have to wait a long time. If we are too soon with something. So those are little practical points. Give me just a second here. And I'm sure I could go on, but let me just add one other kind of principle to this, which is that people don't really like to be corrected. You may have noticed that in your life. And particularly people that you don't know that well, but in many cases people that you know quite well. They don't necessarily appreciate your criticism or your corrective comment, even if it's well meant, even if it's well thought out, and in fact quite true. So you have to sort of feel out. And I say all this because we should really be correcting is ourselves. It's very easy to look at another person and say, ha ha ha, you need to, X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, maybe they do, but they have the privilege of choosing when they address X, Y, or Z in their own life. And we similarly have that choice for ourselves. And trying to fix someone else is often an excuse for not looking at whatever we need to do inside of ourselves. And so that too is an aspect of ego, as Nirmala was mentioning, that when we're focused too much on the other person in terms of, oh, I see, you need to do this, especially if it's spoken angrily. Oh, I've learned, and this is something Swamiji shared with us many times, sentences that begin with, you always, or you never, danger, dangerous words, you always and you never, those should pretty well be banished from close relationships, let's just say. And it's unlikely to be a good idea in other ones as well, but particularly in close relationships, that's just steering towards trouble, because that kind of generalization is rarely true, for one thing. You always. No, you don't always, but it's just convenient for me to say so because I want to make a big emphasis of this point. Or you never. Well, that's unlikely also. And even if it were true, it's not relevant, because the point is, if there's discomfort on the inside, we need to become love, as Nirmala said. We need to become 100% love, and then we can actually understand the person. Frequently, there's something behind the scenes that we haven't understood. Even close relationships, there's always more to learn. There's always more to understand. Nirmala and I just passed our 30th anniversary this week. And 30 years is a chapter, you might say. A rather substantial chapter, actually. But, in the grand scheme of things, it's a blink. It's a blink in eternity. And to actually know somebody might take 100 years, 1,000 years. It might take merging into God before we actually know someone else truly and completely. So that element of respect has to be there, that we aren't always going to know why, or we aren't always going to understand the nuances behind the scenes. And those things have to play out in their time. And we have to give, and I'll just add this because not all of us live with a partner or even necessarily live in a household with anyone else much, that relationships also include our relationship with ourselves. And we have to give ourselves the space to grow. You know, it's not that I remember this challenge early on in my life on the path, that I just expected that if I knew the right thing to do, therefore I could do it. Well, no, not necessarily at all. Or if I knew the right principle, that I had integrated it in my life. Well, guess again, integrating deep spiritual realization into your life can take years. It can take lifetimes. So we have to give ourselves the space to grow into those things, because they grow organically. A redwood tree that may be 100 meters tall does not get there, from a seedling in a weekend. I mean, it's going to take its years to grow. And we have to give our own spiritual lives a chance to do that. At the same time, realizing that we have God now. And the relationships that we have are a marvelous mirror to our own growth, and sometimes an unpleasant mirror, I have to say, because sometimes we realize unpleasant things about ourselves when we look in that mirror of what are we getting, what feedback are we getting from other people. Some people always have trouble with relationships. It's like there's always something wrong, and ultimately the something wrong is on the inside. There's something out of tune on the inside. Relationships help us to see that. Swamiji wrote the wonderful book, A Renunciate Order for the New Age. Hence we're wearing blue and we have the title Nayaswami in front of our names. Well, in that book, he talks about what are the advantages of formal renunciation? What are the disadvantages of formal renunciation? And there are some. What are the advantages of traditional family life? What are the disadvantages of traditional family life? They all have advantages and disadvantages. And it's well for us to study those. It's more than we can go into now. But that book is a profound help for everyone on the spiritual path, whether they are in a family situation or not.